Another kind of editorial interference example from your career that I know is the shoot issue of Hellblazer.
Oh yeah.
What was working on that like from its inception to its kind of disappearance to its later?
I got shoot, I guess, in the 1999, I think it was. And I was thrilled to be assigned that book. Like that's one of the high points of my career. I'm one of those few artists that's been able to gravitate between Vertigo and the DCU proper at DC. I think I have an artistic style and a sensibility that allows me to draw superheroes and draw horror, fairly naturalistic, realistic. And so I've been able to go back and forth, and I bring a bit of a name to the Vertigo stable, which a name essentially just means numbers. I can sell a few more books, and so I think they're always happy to have me there. Shoot was thrilling because it was the first time I got to work with Warren Ellis, and I loved Warren Ellis. I'm sort of obsessed with him. He's actually one of my favorite writers I've ever worked with. Axel Alonso, hired me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to work for Axel. And when I read the script, it was one of the most profound scripts I'd ever read, and I was awed at what Ellis was able to accomplish in 22 pages. The questions he raised and the answers he proffered were like nothing I'd ever seen in a comic. So I was thrilled out of my mind to get this job. And even looking back on it now, it's so funny because I don't think the art is as strong as it would be or as sophisticated as I would be able to make it now. But there's a real earnestness and a real passion there, and you can tell how hard I worked and how much I believed in that project. And it was, I guess I'm kind of proud. I'm one of those few people that's had a comic pulled from the shelves because of scandal. Although I was always really sad about that because I really did think that what that comic had to say was insanely important, particularly at the time.
Speaking of other great creators you've worked with, what was it like working with Grant Morrison on New X-Men and the Invisibles? And you're actually the guy who drew the most recent death of Jean Grey.
I think so.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
The one
Wolverine
that's stuck.
Stabbing her.
Yeah. Spoilers. 10-year-old spoilers.
Sorry. Yeah.
10-year-old spoilers.
Blah, blah,
Sorry,
blah,
guys.
blah. I get this question constantly, and what I think is really funny about it, so I've worked with Grant on and off for, a dozen years. I would say that Grant and Warren are probably two of my three favorite writers to work for ever. Partly because they think big, they think outside the box, and invariably reading their scripts, I learn something new. Grant is funny because a lot of people assume that his scripts are as wild as the material that he's writing.
Yeah.
It's always been my history that Grant writes a script the way everyone else writes a script. Like panel 1, Lord Fanny walks into room. Panel 2, King Mob joins her. The scripts themselves are fairly structured, occasionally a little loosey-goosey. Sometimes they'll go off on tangents about a story beat or why some aspect of a panel is important. Mostly to give me information or another artist information about how to draw things, but he's actually really easy to work for, and he's really easy to work with. It's just a matter of sort of making real or at least visualizing the material he's asking for in the script. Sometimes that just requires heavy reference, and sometimes it requires a bit of imagination, but I like it because I sort of feel like, other than Frank Quitely, who I think is literally Grant's perfect co-artist, I'm one of those people that gets Grant, and he elevates me, and I make him a little more accessible, and I think we're a really good team, particularly on superhero stuff, because I think I make him really readable, and he writes, I feel like, to my strengths. I just adore working with him and for him. He's amazing, but his scripts are really quite normal.
All right. So I have to ask, how did the Spider-Man hand double cameo thing come about? What was the process on that?
I can't believe that was 10 years ago. It was actually this simple. Like, a friend of mine at Sony Pictures calls me up. He's like, we need a hand double for Tobey Maguire. Do you know anyone? And I was like, I can do that. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, I can totally be his hand double. He's like, what do you need? He's like, well, we're going to need pictures of your hand and samples. I'm like, I'll totally do it. He's like, okay. So this was on a Wednesday or Thursday, and I remember going home and making a bunch of sketchbooks. They were Peter Parker's notebooks for high school, doodling in them, scribbling in them, pages of that. And then having a friend take digital photographs of my hand at DC Comics, ironically enough. We photographed my hand from holding a pen, sent them in. I believe this was on a Thursday. And the next Monday, I was out in Los Angeles
Doodling
on
the
set
Spider-Man
for a
costume.
week. Yes, being fitted for the same clothes that Tobey Maguire was being fitted for, having a spider bite placed on my hand, and then doing little pieces of art that ultimately ended up as set decoration. If you kind of look in the back of the Tobey Maguire set for his Peter Parker's room, you can see like these little drawings and stuff that I did. And I think the notebooks ended up on stage. But it was a really wonderful experience, primarily because Sam Raimi was so good to me and so sweet. And because I just sat in Aunt May's house for 3 days, like drawing, got paid a ridiculous amount of money. And it's actually really funny, I think I can say this now, this was before the web shooters were removed, because there was another hand double that did the web shooters, and this guy had the web shooters on set. And so I started working, literally it was the first week of shooting. And so all the hand doubles would get together and we'd like talk about what we were
Compare
doing.
hands.
Yeah, compare hands and like, but a couple of fun memories from that. One was that they liked the results so much that a year later they called me back and asked me to do another several days worth of work. It's like, sure, I mean, that's fantastic. But it was one of the first times I had ever worked with a camera over my hand. So I was actually watching what I was doing in a monitor, and I couldn't really see. And one of my favorite moments whenever I sort of catch that movie on cable, is I was writing a word, and now I can't even think of what the word was, but there was an exclamation point behind it. And it was our last shot of the day, and we'd gone several times because the hand would blur, I would write the wrong way, there was always some mess up, and they were like, this is it. And so I wrote the thing, exclamation point, and it was perfect. It was like, cut, we're done. And so whenever I see that makes me, it's like, I remember that moment, because I couldn't even see what it's writing, but I got it, exclamation point, done. So it was actually, it's just one of those things where a friend called me up. I mean, I want to say it was more difficult than that, but he's like, do you know anyone? And I took the initiative. I was like, get me on that job, I'll do it, click, And it was actually pretty great. And the other fun thing now is when I see advertisements for that movie on TNT, and there's a shot of Tobey Maguire pulling out his trunk, and he opens it up, and that sketchbook's there, and it's the Spider-Man costume. I always sort of get a kick out of it, because I'm like, that's me.
Yeah.
And I'm SAG eligible.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
I don't know if it's still true, but that year, like, I had to sign up for SAG because I guess that's what hand doubles do.